All right. Well, I want to apologize for the problems we've had with Blackboard today. It is definitely one of those things, and one of those things that you will find out kind of happens when you take online classes. For those of you who panicked a little bit, uh, don't panic over stuff like that. I have taken online classes as well as taught online classes, and it's just one of those things that pops up. Technology's great when it works, not so great when it doesn't work. I will always rule in your favor of these things. So, if time is an issue for you today, if you're planning on taking the exam today, I did open that until Tuesday, so you've got plenty of time to get that in. If you still have scheduling conflicts, let me know. Um, that also means I was not able to get some things graded today that I wanted to, because teaching online, you guys turn your assignments in online. That's where I go in to grade them. So, with that being said, I did update your course schedule of assignments, and you can see that it's in the syllabus tab. Basically, I had a fluff week built in there. I have removed that fluff week out, and I pushed your paper back 1 week to give you a little bit more time on that, since I haven't been able to get everything graded. Hopefully, I can have that assignment graded by tomorrow night. It's what I'm shooting for personally, because this did push me back a little bit as well. So, anyways, let's dive in here. At the end of Washington's term, he had served 2 consecutive terms back to back, so 8 years. And he felt that if he went any longer than that, then, it could very easily slide into kind of a monarchy type thing. And so he did go ahead and walk away after 2 terms. And he set up a basic precedence. It was an unspoken thing. That the President of the United States should only serve 2 terms back to back. Now, that actually isn't official until sometime well after Franklin Delano Roosevelt's term in office, where he was actually elected 4 times. Now, he didn't complete all 4 of those terms, but he was elected 4 times in office. It was after him that we see, kind of a law about that on presidential terms. So when it comes up, we see John Adams, who is a Federalist, against Thomas Jefferson, who ran for the Democratic Republican ticket. And really, what you've kind of got is this Federalist, anti-Federalist thing going on here, where your Federalists are more big government, and your anti-Federalists are more of a very small federal government. And Adams does win this the first time. And one of the things that Washington had warned about in his farewell address, which was printed in newspapers, he had warned about the United States getting involved in foreign entanglements. And from the start, Adams has some problems with this. And one of those is the XYZ affair. France technically was still ticked that the U.S. declared neutrality after they had helped in the Revolutionary War. I kind of think back to the last set of lectures before fall break, before your exam. And they were very angry about the British Friendly Jay Treaty. So the French basically detained American ships that were carrying British goods. And by 1797, more than 300 ships had been lost to the French. So rather than war, Adams decides, okay, let's send some people over. Let's negotiate this. Let's not just jump the gun on declaring war. So he sends 3 commissioners to France to negotiate. The French minister also sent 3 men, and these 3 men are known as X, Y, and Z. Now, they were anonymous. Thus, the picture that you see there, you can't see their faces. You don't know what their names are. They were just known as X, Y, and Z. And when they get there, they say, okay, you have to pay us $250,000 for us to possibly begin negotiating. Now, essentially, what they want is a $12 million loan. And that's what they're saying that the U.S. has to provide them in order to have a peace treaty. Of course, the United States rejects the offer. Congress designated money for a 10,000 soldier army, repealed all prior treaties with France, and in 1798, there is a small little naval warfare. This is the first undeclared war after the Revolutionary War, so it's one of those, it's kind of a war, but it's not really a declared kind of war. 20 naval ships, and this is known as the Quasi-Wars. So there was absolutely no home front unity. It intensified problems between the Federalists and the Republicans. And by 1798, the Quasi-War subsided. 1800 negotiations resulted in a treaty declaring a true and sincere friendship between the United States and France. Another problem that Adams had in his presidency was that tensions were so high that Adams and Congress implemented the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now, the Sedition Act dealt with, it basically made conspiracy and revolt illegal. So if you go back and you think about that Whiskey Rebellion that you wrote about, or that you looked at the document, this is kind of one of those things that it is going to make those things illegal. It penalized speaking or writing anything that defamed the president or Congress. Now, think about that. Kind of goes against some bills of rights, right? Criminal offense to criticize government leaders. 25 men, mainly Republican newspaper editors, were charged with sedition. 12 were convicted during this time. Now, the two Alien Acts, one of those extended the waiting period for an immigrant to achieve citizenship from 5 to 14 years, which also meant that they had to register with the federal government. The president could deport or imprison without trial any foreigner suspected of being potentially dangerous to the U.S. during time of war. So some states tried to nullify this. Kentucky and Virginia were two of those states, and they said that based on states' rights, they had the right to judge the constitutionality of the federal laws, and they saw these laws as being unconstitutional. So they argued, and I think I would concur at this point, looking at this, that it infringed on the liberties of people through the Bill of Rights. All the elements combined caused Adams to lose a significant amount of support from his own party. So by the time we see the election of 1800 come up, we've got Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr was of New York, and so the problem is Jefferson and Burr both received an equal amount of votes. You can see their electoral votes are 50% and 50%. Originally, the person that receives the most votes became president, and the runner-up became the vice president. It's not like it is now, where you have two people running on a party ticket. It was, so if Jefferson won, Burr would be vice president. If Burr won, Jefferson would be vice president. And to begin with, they thought that this would prevent factions. But however, it did lead to some very serious issues. Really, it's hard to get anything accomplished when the president and the vice president are on opposing sides. And further, Burr he refused to concede here. So the sitting Federalist-dominated House chose the president, and one of the things you get from this is the 12th Amendment, which was adopted in 1804, and it provided the two distinct ballots for the two different offices. So it's not even that they're going to run on tickets together like what we do now. They're going to have distinct ballots for a while. And with this, what we see where Alexander Hamilton really does cause some problems here, and he influenced the House, and he was not a friend of Jefferson, but he did find Jefferson to be the lesser of two evils because he absolutely despised Aaron Burr. He did think that Jefferson was a hypocrite, but he said while he may be a hypocrite, he was not corrupt, which Hamilton did think that Burr was corrupt. 36 ballots, and 6 days later, Jefferson got the votes he needed to win the election. And, I mean, Hamilton and Burr despised one another so much that they ended up dueling. There's a Broadway play about that now, which I hear is absolutely fantastic, that I've not had a chance to watch. But they duked it out, and they ended up dueling there. So Gabriel's rebellion happens, is kind of another crisis that we see kind of going on. In the midst of an election crisis, there was also a storm absolutely brewing. So you've got these problems with these two men, which one's going to win, which one's going to lose. And Gabriel was born in 1776 on Thomas Prosser's tobacco plantation in Virginia. He began training as a blacksmith around the age of 10, and while very little is known about his parents, it's very likely that his father was also a blacksmith, and even for slaves, it's very possible to pass a trade from generation to generation. So as a child, he was taught to read and write, and he was unusually intelligent, and by age 20, he was about 6'2", maybe 6'3" tall. And he was absolutely enormously strong from smithing, because, I mean, that's very physical labor. And so even at a young age, he was seen as a leader by even older slaves. Upon the older Prosser's death, his son, Thomas Henry Prosser, at age 22 became, Prosser was the guy who owned the slave, okay, that we're talking about. So Gabriel was owned by Thomas Henry Prosser. But upon Prosser's death, his son took over, and he was very cruel. He was economically ambitious. He pushed his slaves too hard. He hired out skilled slaves. Now, it's interesting that he does this as hard as he is, but one, it does give him more money, but the problem is it also gives the slaves more freedom. And it was actually an illegal practice in Virginia, but it was not enforced. So Thomas Henry allowed Gabriel to hire himself out to masters in and around Richmond, which gave him access to money as well. So while Prosser makes money off of Gabriel also, whenever he hires himself out, can make money himself. And he met many slaves, many freed blacks, many white laborers. And honestly, he shared his leisure time with those people. And so Gabriel experienced many strong influences. He overheard that rhetoric of the American Revolution. He overheard people talking about that uprising in Haiti, which we talked about. So very radical words of white artisans who champion the working class. He saw some successes that were exhibited by free blacks, and his own hatred of merchants who routinely cheated the slaves that they hired. He had this overwhelming desire to be free and to prosper. And so his brother Solomon said, "My brother Gabriel was the person who influenced me to join him and others in order that we might conquer the white people and possess ourselves of their property." So by 1799, Gabriel and his brother Solomon and a fellow slave named Jupiter stole a pig. And when caught, Gabriel wrestled the man to the ground, bit off most of his ear. Gabriel escaped execution through a loophole called the benefit of the clergy. So it allowed him to choose a public branding over execution if he could recite a verse from the Bible, which, if he's educated and he is literate, then most likely he learned to read from the Bible. So it was no big deal. So that's what he did. He planned to go to the Catawbas to persuade them to join with their fight against the white people. And he also thought that the French in the Caribbean would help. So he started actually recruiting soldiers, and the conspirators drew in slaves, free blacks, and a few white workers, 2 Frenchmen, and a militant abolitionist. We'll pick up there in the next one.